It's me again. Are you surprised? Thank you, Captain Obvious. So it's time for another Patreon video. Yay! You or not. I don't know how you feel about these. So I wanted to do just a quick little personal, this isn't a story time video. This is just more, FYI, trivia, stupid stuff kind of video. I promise there'll be some entertainment in here, so just hang with me. Um, so today was the first day of school for my kids. They had to get up at like 7:30, and I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, the door is closed and I'm kind of hiding out because they are not happy with me today. But we had no major hiccups. The internet connection stayed. They got to do their assessment test, and yeah, it's a win. So I'm very happy. But it is also Tuesday, and I'm trying to kind of set up a schedule so that we can be a little more organized about my Patreon posts. I know they've been kind of messy lately. I'm very sorry. So we'll try for, Tuesdays being video day, Wednesdays are main show day, and maybe sometime, from either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, do a bonus episode. And I mean, I've got nothing else going on the weekends now, so why not? So, the purpose of today's video. Why did I start a podcast? Why do I do these videos? So there's actually a good reason for this. I know it seems like everybody and their cat has a podcast nowadays. I'm a huge fan of podcasts. I can't tell you how much time I spend listening to podcasts, because of, working out and stuff like that. I need something to listen to. And there is a wealth of not only entertainment podcasts, but educational podcasts that are just, I love them. And it wasn't through loving podcasts that made me want to start one of my own. I think honestly it was through love of books that made me want to start a podcast. I recently co-wrote a book with my dear friend Wesley Southard, and if you don't know, Wesley and I have been friends for years at this point. When we do conventions together, we almost always share a table. We're almost always together there, and so we spend hours and hours and hours at conventions just talking. There's a lot of time spent yelling at each other because our taste in horror movies vary, very big time. So, that first vary was VARY, the second vary was VERY. I mean, I really should be better at choosing my words by now, but this is why I need an editor. But, at one of the recent cons that we did, not recent, it was last year. It was over a year ago. Not recent, I'm sorry. But last year we were doing a con, and he kind of mentioned that he had never read Fahrenheit 451. And there were a couple other authors around us, and we were all, really, how does that happen? How were you not made to read it in school? But to be perfectly honest, I didn't read it in school. I read it afterwards on my own. Where did I get it? I have it in ebook. I must have just gotten it on Amazon and read it on ebook, but he'd never read it, had never really felt compelled to read it. And, so many of us were just, how is that? How do you not want to read this? Now, in case you don't know, not to make this all about him, but Wesley is one of the most well-read horror writers in the horror genre. You choose any small press horror writer, you choose any horror writer from the last century, and he has read them, he is familiar with them. He has a very good grasp on the horror genre, but it became apparently clear that he only reads horror. And I have no problem with that. You do what you need to do. Reading is entertainment. Reading is to make you feel good. And that's what makes him feel good. No hate there. But it got me wondering how many other people have not, considered reading these books. What I try to do with the podcast is to dispel biases. I think that anti-intellectualism has done irreparable harm, not only to society, but our entire culture. And it horrifies me when people are proud to tell someone that they don't read, or when they're proud to say, oh, I only get all my information from Facebook. And there are people like that. And I don't want to hate on them, because I think there's so much normalization of it in society nowadays. Now, having said that, I also really don't care for intellectual snobbery. People who do like to look down. The people, there's a gnat, the people who look down on Wesley because he said he hadn't read Fahrenheit 451. He just hadn't had the opportunity. Did I get it? Ooh, I got it. Ha ha. He just hadn't had the opportunity. And I want to approach the podcast that way. You just haven't had the opportunity. Let me, explain to you why it might be worth your time. That's it. But there are other reasons, One, I love research. I love reading up on things. As I was getting ready today, and yes, getting ready to do this, I may have decorated for Halloween, but I don't want to star in a monster movie as the monster. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. It gets bad. But I love research, and I was actually listening to Lore, the podcast, and I went down at like a mental rabbit hole listening to it. He was talking about all the castles built throughout Britain during the Norman conquest. The Normans went through and built tons and tons of castles, and then it became this weird thing of you know what? I'm not going to give you a history lesson on this. Maybe later when maybe when I talk about Arthurian legends, which I love. Sorry, right now we'll move on. But someone was living in one of these castles. Her name was Sabina, which got me thinking, what about the rape of the Sabine women? What's that from? I know I've seen a painting about that. What was that? So I've been sitting here at my computer doing, research on what was the Sabine women. It's a Roman myth about, how Roman men were able to finally get women through kidnapping them and, getting them pregnant. And that's how they peopled Rome. And we don't know how true that is, but there's some really dramatic artwork that comes along with it. So I love research. I'm a pulp writer. What I write is not deeply intellectually stimulating. It's entertaining. That's what I'm going for. But even with my, pulpy stuff, I have to research every one of my books because I love it. But I mean, it's fun. And I have to do a lot of research for the podcast. And it thrills me to no end to be able to do that. The second big reason is as an author, you have to really put yourself out there. And this will actually ties in with the last reason I'll be giving. I have a sticky note that I'm looking at, so I keep pointing it. I'm sorry. But you have to put yourself out there. In the age of social media, in the age of the internet, people feel entitled to a certain amount of access to you as a writer. And I mean, even us small press writers, us indie writers who are nothing, we are a drop in a bucket. People expect to be able to, I should be able to find your email address. I should be able to find you on social media. I should be able to find videos of you and pictures of you. It's a sense of entitlement over us. And some people, choose to be very open, very personal, all access. And some people tend to be a little more curated in the kind of content of themselves that they let out. There's the author persona that you get with a lot of people. And it's just, a matter of taste, what you're comfortable with. I'm uncomfortable with it all, personally. It makes me uncomfortable. And I've also had some things happen, a couple years ago, someone found my website, summercanon.com, where it's just all about, the author. And he left kind of a dirty comment, and it made me, why did you do that? Why did you do that? And he apologized after it became apparent I was not okay with that. But it was still like, ew. I'll talk books. I'll talk about any book besides my own happily. Please don't be gross. Anyway, one of the other things you have to do as an author, I mean, you have to put yourself out there. You have to do conventions. You put your face out there. And at conventions, you normally will do readings. And at different appearances, you have to stand up and do a reading, which scares the shit out of me. The first time I did a reading was for Scares That Care charity convention. I was sharing a time slot with author Stephen Kazanewski, who is a fan favorite. So our room was pretty full. And I watched Stephen Kazanewski just kill it because he really is great. And I got up there and I had written this piece that had, it was horror funny. So it was full of jokes. I did voices, I did accents. I also read it so fast that I was out of breath by the time I was done. It was a bad first reading. And I had people, supporting me going, oh, it'll be better next time. That was still good. That was still good. And I knew better. Thankfully, I can take a few tips from Stephen Kazanewski. He gave me a really, really great piece of advice, which was when you're doing a reading in front of people, make it a performance. Really, because they're looking at you, they're not just listening to you, make it a performance. And if you've ever had the pleasure of going to a Stephen Kazanewski reading, they are a performance, which helped me a lot. My second reading last year at Scares That Care went a lot better because I went with that, and people were cracking up. They were laughing at the new story that I'd written. But then I had a reading last October, about a year ago, at a library, and there was nobody there, but I was having a bad anxiety day. And it happens, I have anxiety issues, and it was a horrible reading. I could barely get through it. I had to keep stopping to breathe. So one of the reasons for this podcast is practicing my reading out loud. That's why I do a reading almost every episode. And even in the bonus episodes, usually I take time to do a reading because honestly, I'm practicing for when I have to do this in front of people, because it scares the shit out of me. It makes me very, very nervous. Tie that in with the fact that, I have a lot of anxiety about people looking at me. I don't know how to explain that. I know how weird that sounds. I have to do these conventions with other horror writers, and because of the nature of it, most horror writers are men, and they all have for the most part, a very similar look. They're usually in concert t-shirts, the very laid back looking guys, and then there's me, and I very much look like a minivan driving mom. I do. So I get overlooked a lot because people, they honestly assume a lot that I'm Wes's girlfriend or his wife, and that I'm not one of the writers. They'll come up to our table, which is full of books with 2 different names on it, and go, "Did you write all these books?" And it's like, Wes didn't see it at first, but he does now. And it's so funny watching him go, "Oh, there's 2 different names." And it comes from other places too, my anxiety about the way I look. Long story, snorry story. Don't worry about it. I won't tell it. But I have anxiety about being looked at. So, once lockdown started, I just out of pure boredom happened upon this YouTube channel that told true crime stories. And the woman who was telling these true crime stories she's a makeup artist. So she was doing her makeup at the same time. And I was like, I could do that. This is something that's actually creative. I've always kind of been a, 5 minutes and done, get ready kind of person. I don't like to put a lot of time into myself. And with the lockdown and having all this time, it was nothing to just sit down and try to learn a couple new things, try to learn a little more color, because it is creative. It's not this vain, vapid thing that I've always associated with vain, vapid people, especially my mom. My mom has always kind of been someone who turned me off of that because lots of reasons. I'm not going to sit here and shit talk my mom, but it was always just something that I didn't want to be. And then I took a fresh look at it and was like, well, let's give it a try. Let's try to be nice to myself. That's what a lot of this is. Me trying to be nice to myself, me trying to grow a callus when it comes to being seen, being out there, because that's probably the hardest part of this job. Writing a book is hard. You know, I get people every now and then will ask me, what advice do you have for aspiring writers? And the advice I usually give, more often than not, is finish what you start. Everybody seems to start writing a book, and almost nobody finishes it. That's where it's hard. Starting to write a book is easy. Just you sit down with a pen and paper, or you open up a Word document and you're off. Finishing it is hard. Ending something is very hard. But it doesn't even come close to having to go out in public not looking like a horror chick and trying to sell my horror books, trying to be taken seriously as a horror writer, not a paranormal romance writer. I don't write romance. I'm not a romantic person. I don't give a shit about stuff like that. But people look at me and assume. I don't write erotic horror. There's sex in some of my books. You know, if the story calls for it to be kind of hot and heavy, it goes in there. But otherwise, no. That I am writing horror, monsters, bad people, blood and gore. That's what I write. And I have a lot of anxiety of being seen or not seen, really. So it's a problem. So that's why I'm doing this. This is me, I don't know, is it therapy, self-therapy? I mentioned before trying to grow a callus and trying to not be so sensitive about it. So it's nice. You guys are paying basically to be my guinea pigs. Thank you. I can't tell you how much it means to me. We'll do a story time next week. I said before, I mean, I've got notes. I've been keeping my ideas down. That's all I've got on my sticky note. Reminder, tomorrow is Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. That's going to be a good one. And then I have no idea what my next bonus episode will be on. I'm still not very far in on Hannibal. You can see that's my progress. It's good so far. It's a lot like the movie, honestly, so far, but we'll see. And I will let you know this weekend. I'll find something. I've got so many books lying around here, so don't worry. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Thank you for being, on here on Patreon. And let's see if the remote works. I'll get around someday to editing out these little arguments I have with my remote. I'm sorry, but I think they're funny. So let's see. What do you think? Bye. It didn't do it.